think really we ought to get busy beforehand and start doing things in the next few weeks. I think some of these can be quite small things. I mean, I took part in a demonstration before that was organised by the Convention of the Left, where we stood in Piccadilly beating pots and pans. I think something like that, though perhaps small, we could intensify that. Why not do the same thing in the branch of a bank? Why not, at the same time as we're doing that in one bank, do it in a number? I think there's a number of actions like that that don't necessarily need a cast of thousands, that you could get yourself both into the news and also across to ordinary, everyday people. I think the fight back has got to start today.
When we think about the anti-trade union laws, the problem that we have is, in reality, the anti-trade union laws have actually taken on a new dimension in the past few months. If you look at the judgments that took place around the British Airways dispute and the judgment around the BT pay ballot, then the judges intervened on the basis that effectively the strike action would be declared illegal on balloting irregularities, etc., but without even any evidence of balloting irregularities. In other words, just on the presumption that the employer was telling the truth, on the presumption that the employer had a reasonable fear of what would happen, and also on the presumption that there would be disruption to public service. Now, that takes the anti-union laws on a stage further. Why is this worth pointing out? This is worth pointing out because we need to recognise that the workers involved did not immediately jump out on strike against the judgment. They did not immediately take it on. They did not do anything, actually. This was Unite and the CW, both technically left-dominated unions. There was next to no fight over it. Now, we have to take into account that reality as well when we're talking about taking on the anti-union laws. When we start to take action, yes, it will be coordinated action. Yes, you will get unions where there is still sectional strips, such as the RMT, who stand out. But at the same time, there is incredible sectional weakness as well. We can't simply believe that if we say we will take on the anti-union laws, that people will come out with us. It's not that simple. There needs to be a recovery process. And the process may not come from within industry. It may come from within community campaigns. It may come from within the fight to save an hospital, etc., etc. So that I think we need to be quite careful and quite sober about the kind of sloganising that we're doing here. And be aware that actually the movement is seeking to recover. The movement has taken an absolute battering in terms of composition of the trade unions and in terms of organisation of the trade unions. If things are at a historic low, 7.5 million. Compared to even 12 million in the 1990s. Things have actually got quite a bit lower. The way in which the cuts are going to hit, the way in which the privatising agenda is going to hit, is actually going to affect workers' conditions even more. It's going to affect things like facility time. The Tories repeatedly, in the last days of the last Parliament, raised questions in the House of Commons about facility time in public sector unions. That question was raised persistently. I don't believe that was an accident.
Lindsay.
Right, okay, well thanks very much, John, and thank you very much for inviting me here. And I think these discussions are the kind of things that we need when we're facing the sort of attacks that we do. Now, I want to say a very quick thing about the war and stop the war. I mean, this war in Afghanistan, which we're still involved in, is a war that has been going on for 9 years now, almost exactly. That is longer than the First World War, it's longer than the Second World War. In fact, it's approaching as long as the two wars combined. We still have a record number of troops in Afghanistan. The war is spreading. President Obama this week made another attack on Iran, and I think that the possibility of a war in Iran is very, very great. The war is spreading to Pakistan. We quite rightly campaign over Gaza and over what happened in Palestine, but actually the drone attacks in Pakistan have killed more people in those border areas than were killed by the bombing of Gaza in 2009 by the Israelis. A fact that most people aren't surprised of, because this is barely covered in the British newspapers or anywhere else. And that's why I think it's very important that we understand we're in a period of economic crisis, and we're talking quite rightly about the cuts and all the things that are affecting us deeply, but we're also in a period of wars. The Iraq war isn't over. There are still 50,000 American troops there. All of these things are still going on. And that's why I'd like more, if you can, to try to support this demonstration we're having. It's to mark a summit, a NATO summit in Lisbon on the 20th of November, and we're having a demonstration in London. We'd like everybody who can to do what they can to get this through their trade union branches and to support it in any way, and I'll pass around the examples. The other thing I wanted to say is that think that what we're all talking about is that we are now facing the fight of our lives. But what is happening with the cuts in this country, and it isn't just the cuts, I think we're all aware of that. I think, you know, whatever people are focused on talking about, this isn't just the cuts, this is an attack by a government which doesn't have the legitimacy to do it, but even if it did, it is the most vicious attack on working people that we have seen for generations now, really since the 1930s, where what they are posing is a question: do we have welfare for the bankers, or do we have welfare for the rest of us? And of course their answer is, we have welfare for the bankers and the rest of you can just rely on charity or families or all the other things that people used to have to do in the bad old days that our parents talked about. That is a situation that we're now facing. So therefore we have a very urgent crisis here. I believe this isn't just a question of individual unions fighting as individuals. That's very welcome and it's very important, but as Mick has already referred to, it's an attempt by unions to link up so that they fight together. But even that isn't enough. I believe we need a mass movement involving the unions, involving communities, involving pensioners, students, school kids, everybody else has to link to do this. Now, one of the things that we did, and Terry will be talking about this later on, but in the summer I was one of the people, and some of the people in Stop the War were involved in this, people like Andrew Murray, our chair, launched a campaign called the Coalition of Resistance. We're having a conference on November the 27th, which people are very welcome, obviously, to come to, and if you will sign up now, would be very, very good. We issued a statement which was written by Tony Benn and signed by a number of other people, which has got a lot of support. Thousands of people have now signed it, and it's partly what we want to stress. There's a lot of well-known people who signed it, some union leaders and Tony Benn and people like that, but we want it to be very much a grassroots campaign, and therefore we've had 20 care workers from Hull have signed up to it. That kind of pensioners in Cumbernauld have signed up to it, and I think any campaign has to have this element of it to be successful. The final thing I want to say about it is, I think one of the things we all know is that the left is very divided. It was a great deal of sectarianism on the left. The idea of the Coalition of Resistance is to try to be, and this is always the best of intentions, which isn't always achieved in these things, but to try to be as non-sectarian. We want it to be a broad, united campaign. We've talked to the People's Charter, and we hope that we'll be working closer together. We hope we can do this with other organisations, because there are many organisations. But we are at the moment fragmented. And it seems to me one of the things that we have to do is to try and pull these different fragments together and to build that unified campaign. That's really what we're committed to doing. I think the conference will be a very important part. I agree very much with the man who spoke a little bit earlier, that we can't wait till March. March is a very important time for us to build a mass demonstration. But we also do need to support the demonstrations now. There's one at the Republic Conference next week. There's a whole number of things on the 19th and 20th in London by the pensioners, the Coalition of Resistance, by Unison in Camden, by all sorts of people. There will be loads of things going on, and people are looking to us to try to give a lead. These struggles will continue, like the struggle in Bolton will continue if we're there or not. That is the truth of it, because people will have to fight back. What we need to do as the left is think very seriously how we can unite the different campaigns and how we can help to give a lead so they go in a direction which eventually is victorious.